Well, hello again, everybody. So now today we'll talk a little bit about Adlerian therapy. Here we have Alfred Adler, a picture of him as a I don't know, prime of his theory, you might say. Let's look at some facts about Adler. Much like Freud, Adler grew up in Vienna. And as we were talking about psychoanalysis, I shared with you how if I, am able to create a time machine one day, this is a place to go back to because this is a real hotbed of activity pre World War II, and so Vienna is where he's from. He had many siblings. One brother who died at a young age, and he was extremely jealous of a particular brother named Sigmund. And so you might remember from the psychoanalysis theory that Freud and Adler were very near to one another in the beginning of Freud's work and then later split. And so I always find it kind of this particular point kind of interesting that he had trouble with a brother Freud, and it begins to make me wonder a little bit about projection, but that's maybe taking it a little too far. Adler was also sick a lot as a child. He, however, did not allow those limitations to get him down. He fought, he battled, he attempted at every turn to overcome those limitations, which I think is important and later comes to be valuable in this theory. So, not a particularly good student. That's kind of interesting, I think, too. We tend to think that these men were gifted and bright and very articulate and ahead of their time, but in fact he was not. But he was able to go on to medical school, and he found a passion, particularly with childhood diseases, and so that's no doubt somewhat due to his own experience as a child. So last year on this slide, as I mentioned, he studied with Freud, but eventually broke off. The two of them had quite the contentious split, and he basically called Freud's theory excessively narrow. And what the basis from that is that Adler went on to say, you know what, people are motivated by social relatedness. They're motivated by their environment much more than they are by these sexual urges that Freud talked about. So here's some similarities between the two. I think, as I mentioned in the psychoanalysis presentation, a lot of these theories build upon the previous one, and kind of continue those thoughts, or they do the opposite, and that is tear them down. This one, my theory is better because it's the polar opposite of the person ahead of me. So Adler did believe that childhood experiences influence us, but he was interested in the perceptions and meaning we attach to those experiences. That's called phenomenological, and we'll hit more on that in later theories. But the important thing is people's perception and meaning that they connect to the experiences. So Freud and Adler lived in the same city, went to the same university, grew up in the same era. Both were physicians. We've talked about that. And so what childhood experiences in Adler's life may have influenced Adlerian theory. So remember, he came from a large family with lots of conflict in it. And so Alfred Adler later goes on to be the birth order theory creator. And so and for those of you that are not familiar with birth order, really it goes on to say that the order in which you were born in the sibling strip, you take on certain characteristics based upon that. And so that's kind of interesting.